This lesson is about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use light and water and carbon dioxide to make sugar and then oxygen as a byproduct. Many people consider photosynthesis to be the most important biological process. It's where all our food comes from. A lot of our fiber comes from photosynthesis, so think wood, think cotton. Those are two fibers. A lot of our fossil fuel comes from the process of photosynthesis and fossil plants. And then finally, in the history of the Earth, photosynthesis has been an important process in that it pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And just like today our atmosphere is heating because we're adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, if you pull out CO2 from the atmosphere, people think over the history of the Earth we've had some episodes of a snowball Earth where the Earth became very cold due to the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere. Right, so the chemical equation that you probably have seen that many people use here is 6 CO2 plus 6, which is 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecules, goes to make C6H12O6, which is glucose, and 6 oxygen molecules. And this process is powered by light energy, and I'm going to abbreviate energy with a big E, and more specifically, photons of light. Photons are the particle form of light. Okay, so we're going to talk about two steps in the process. We're going to talk about a first step, which some people call light reactions, and a second step, which are photo-independent reactions. So I'll write those down. The first step, the more modern term that people use today, are photo-dependent reactions. And I'm abbreviating reactions RXN. So, as I said, people often refer to those as light reactions. And then the other type of reactions are photo-independent reactions. And the photo-independent reactions at one point were called dark reactions, but that's not really a good term for them because they don't necessarily occur in the dark. They've also been called the Calvin cycle, and they typically are called the Calvin cycle because Melvin Calvin was the one who discovered this process. So let's talk about the location of these. The photo-dependent reactions occur in the thylakoid membranes of the thylakoids. So I'm just going to say thylakoids of the chloroplasts, and the photo-independent reactions occur in the stroma of the chloroplast. Thylakoids are dish-shaped membranous sacs. I like to think of them like pancakes. So an individual pancake would be an individual thylakoid, or vice versa there. And then if you had a stack of them, they're called a granum, and plural of granum is grana. And then the stroma, is the liquid that's around the grana. I like to think of that like maple syrup on the pancakes. So that's just a way to maybe keep it in your mind. All right, so the first step here is that we have light shine down, and it's absorbed by electrons in pigment molecules. And the pigments are things like chlorophyll is the one you hear of most often, but there are several pigment molecules. And as part of that, the water molecules are split. When water has hydrogen in it, it's got electrons in it, and it's got oxygen in it. So when water is split, the byproducts are oxygen, and then there's also an electron carrier that picks up the protons and electrons. So the protons and electrons from water were picked up by these electron carriers. And also ATP is made as part of these photo-dependent reactions. So if we're making NADPH2, we have to start with NADP. And if we're making ATP, we have to start with ADP plus phosphate. Okay, so on here to the photo-independent reactions. And the big thing that's happening in the photo-independent reactions is that carbon dioxide is fixed. And what that means is it's pulled from the atmosphere and it's used as the electron acceptor, and ultimately the energy and electrons are captured and they form glucose, C6H12O6. So this is where all the electrons and the protons ultimately go. In order to fix CO2, the organism is using the energy in the NADPH2 molecule and the ATP molecule to power the fixation of CO2. So the energy and electrons are used from here. They ultimately go to the glucose molecule, and what we're left with is NADP, and ADP plus phosphate. These two molecules can be recycled, and that's it. All right, so to summarize, what's happening in the photo-dependent reactions is water is split, light energy is being converted to chemical energy, and a little more detail, the light energy is going to the pigment electrons, which ultimately goes to NADPH2 and ATP. In this reaction, H2O is the electron donor, and sunlight is the energy source. And then in the photo-independent reactions, what's happening is carbon is fixed, so that's the conversion again of CO2 to sugar. The electrons and protons, which originally started on water, are going to C6H12O6. The energy is being transferred to C6H12O6. And CO2 is the electron acceptor and the carbon source. And just to highlight some of these things with colors, okay, so the names of the two steps are the photo-dependent reactions and the photo-independent reactions. The photo-dependent reactions occur in the thylakoids, and the photo-independent reactions occur in the stroma. The electrons and protons originally start on the water molecule and end up over in the glucose molecule. And the energy comes from light energy and ends up down in the glucose molecule.